And Eric, Heather Lynn and Harry Bakhta are not going to be here this evening.
Right. Okay. Sorry, Ang. I knew two people were missing, but I thought you were one of them. So it's Harry.
No worries.
So we're just going to give Elaine another moment. She tried it again. It still didn't work. See what she does.
Okay. Well, I think we need Elaine, so.
Yes.
So, Michelle,
Hi, Ron.
can you allow me into the meeting?
Yes. And so do you want me to put you in as a panelist?
Yeah.
Michelle, I'm going to step away for 30 seconds. I'll be right back.
That's fine. Thank you, Eric. Okay, it worked with Elaine. Yay.
Good evening, commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Gotcha.
Yes.
Excellent. Are we waiting for additional people to join us at all?
Everyone is here, but Eric stepped away for just a moment. He'll be right back, and then all recordings are on and ready.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you so much for your patience.
Yay, we have Elaine.
And so we're ready, Eric, when you are.
Okay, let's call this meeting to order then at 6:04 p.m. on Tuesday, July 27th. Andrew, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
and
under God,
God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Michelle, can we have a roll call?
Chairman Leach,
Here.
Commissioner Truxillo,
Here.
Commissioner Gaitis,
here.
Commissioner Lothrop,
Here.
Commissioner Liu,
Here.
Vice Chairman Lynn, and Commissioner Bakhta are both excused.
Okay. So then we will move on to public comment. Now, I'll read the notice to the public. This time is set aside to receive public comment on matters not calendared on the agenda. So we have 3 items on the agenda tonight, and there'll be a public hearing for each one of those. So if you have comments specific to those agenda items, you should wait and make those comments at the appropriate time. Right now is for comments on items not on the agenda. When you are recognized, we just request that you state your name and address for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Under California law, the Planning Commission is prohibited from generally discussing or taking action on items not included on the agenda. However, the Planning Commission may briefly respond to comments and questions from members of the public. Therefore, the Planning Commission will listen to all public comment, but will not generally discuss the matter or take action on it. And just a note to those of you who have been attending our Zoom meetings during the pandemic, our procedure has changed just a little bit. So you may still submit public comments in writing via the publicworks@cityofbishop.com email address, writing public comment on the subject line, and city staff will be monitoring that email throughout the meeting. Any comments that were sent before 2 p.m. today have already been given to commissioners, and we'll no longer be reading those aloud at the meeting, but they've been shared with commissioners. If you do send comments, from now onwards, they'll be shared with commissioners after the meeting. If you are on the Zoom webinar and you'd like to make a comment, we ask that you use the hand waving feature, and you'll be called on when appropriate. And once again, we ask that you only limit your comments to 3 minutes. So with that, we'll open public comment.
I have one person who's raising their hand. Eric, it's Robert Sharp. So may I give him permission to speak?
Yeah.
Whoops, he then went away.
Okay, well, while we're waiting, just a reminder that this is the time to comment on things not on the agenda.
Okay, now he's back.
Oh, that was really weird. I could hear you guys just fine. I apologize, but thank you for the time. I was just going to bring up a potential suggestion for future agenda items that when there's a situation where there's a particular possibility for development, that if there's been prior hearings on that property, especially if it's escalated all the way to city council, that maybe that information be included in the commissioner's packets for reference as people changed. And it might be good to have a full background on properties that have been disputed or kind of talked about or categorized in the past. So that's just a unrelated public comment that I just thought I'd throw out that suggestion that it might be helpful to have full background included or reference to past meetings on a particular property brought up.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, Robert. That's a good point, and it's appreciated. Michelle, do we have anyone else wanting to make a comment at this time?
I do not see anyone else.
Okay, so we will close the public comment period at this time and move on to item number 5 on the agenda, which is approval of minutes. These are the minutes from the Planning Commission held on May 25th, subject for approval.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I will second that motion.
Okay, Michelle, can we have a vote?
Commissioner Truxillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Gaitis,
Yes.
Commissioner Lothrop,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Chairman Leach.
Yes.
Minutes of the Planning Commission meeting held on May 25th, 2021, approved as written.
Okay, so with that, let's move on to the agenda items for tonight. According to the request of city staff, and I think it makes sense, we have on the agenda that we'll have 3 back-to-back public hearings and then 3 back-to-back discussions of new business. But with the consent of the Planning Commission, I'd like to reorder that just a little bit and have the presentation, the public hearing, and the Planning Commission discussion on each of those items sequentially, so we can keep all of that together. Are there any objections to that? Okay. Then with that, we will move on to item 6A. And I will invite staff
Actually-
to, sorry. Oh yeah, go ahead, Tricia.
Could I step in? I will need to recuse myself because my husband and I own a property adjacent to the property in question. So I will take my leave now.
Okay, I just before you leave, I think Tricia, you had a question about when you had to leave and whether you could hear the staff report or whether you need to leave at this point. And I think I'll let Keith answer that question.
Thank you. So it is customary to leave the dais as soon as the staff presentation occurs. We've deviated from that principle at times, but it's always the safest to just step out before the staff presentation occurs.
And I'll await a text for when I can rejoin.
So then it looks like we have 4 of 7 commissioners in attendance.
Tricia, does have your phone number?
I will make sure that
Will
at
you
least one of you.
email it? I have my email open.
Sure.
Will you email me? And I will
Absolutely.
text you.
Thank you
Okay,
very much.
thank you.
Keith, just as a point of order, if we had a quorum when we started the meeting, but then we lost enough commissioners that we didn't have a quorum, do we still have a quorum for the meeting, or do we have to table those items?
No, you wouldn't have a quorum if you lost the quorum for the item.
Okay, okay. But 4 out of 7 is still a quorum, so.
Yeah, it looks like you still have a quorum here.
Okay. So then, Elaine, how would you like to do this? I think what I would like is for staff to give a brief presentation, and then we'll open the public hearing, if that's all right.
Yeah, good evening, Chairman Leach. That is definitely my preference. And I think it's typically how we run the Planning Commission. We just don't typically have 3 public hearings in one evening. If the commission is prepared, I'm ready to provide a staff report now.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. As introduced, the first item is a conditional use permit for a property at 168 East Line Street. The property is a currently vacant property, and it has a general plan designation of general commercial and a zoning designation of general commercial and retail. The applicant is Eastern Sierra Investment Group, LLC, and they are submitting on behalf of the current property owner, Chacon Trust. The conditional use permit is to operate a street legal adventure vehicle and gear rental facility, and to provide in the future airport shuttles from the Bishop Airport to destinations in the Bishop environs, potentially including Mammoth. The applicant is also requesting that the driveway be reduced from its standard width in the development code of 24 feet, which is required for a 2-way driveway, to 20 feet wide. The applicant is proposing the buildings will be constructed out of cargo shipping containers, which require a conditional use permit within the Bishop Municipal Code, though that ordinance has been used in the past exclusively to govern placement of shipping containers to be used for storage, not for occupancy. A categorical exemption from CEQA is being considered for this application. As discussed, the applicant is proposing to operate an adventure vehicle rental facility. They intend to have a small fleet of vehicles that will be stored on site with adequate parking to meet the Bishop Municipal Code standards for a retail shop, an office, and a rental gear showroom. The second phase would include using the office to coordinate shuttles from the Bishop Regional Airport to different destinations. However, the applicants intend to coordinate with the Bishop Regional Airport or other parties off-site to identify parking for those shuttles. The request for the reduced driveway width stems from the relatively narrow width of the property, which is 50 feet. The request to reduce the driveway width was reviewed by the City Public Works Director, Destin Deshawn, as well as the Fire Chief, Joe Dell, and neither had concerns with that proposal. The storefront retail space will be used to rent gear, make rental appointments, sell merchandise, and coordinate the shuttles. As I described earlier, the building will be made of 2 8-foot by 20-foot prefabricated shipping containers with a third placed on top to house an office. The retail space, the ground floor retail space, will be finished on the outside with shiplap siding or something similar, and the interior will be finished to the standards of a typical retail space. So the intent of the applicant as proposed is that it would be, the cargo containers would be used for construction, but would have finishes exterior and interior that would be intended to be consistent with the surrounding uses on that block as they are now. I should mention that the the storage container ordinance for the city of Bishop prohibits stacking cargo containers. However, again, that ordinance was written primarily to address placement of the cargo containers for storage, not for construction for occupancy. So the Planning Commission has some discretion in determining if that would apply in this instance. In any case, if the Planning Commission were to approve the use of the cargo containers for construction and occupancy, they would be required to meet the standards of the California Building and Safety Code, which does not prohibit stacking cargo containers for occupancy. The applicant is proposing that there will be 10 parking spaces on site. 5 will be used for fleet storage. The additional 5 will be used for business and customer parking. This is consistent with the requirements of the zoning code for the general commercial and retail district. The applicant is also proposing in their site plan that approximately 3,000 square feet of the property would be landscaped, which is in excess of the 2% requirement in the Bishop Municipal Code. The surrounding properties are all also commercially zoned and in commercial uses. I did receive the correction since the agenda was published that there is one existing apartment that is located directly to the east of the building, and there are other residences across the street and a little further down the block, though not immediately adjacent to the proposed property. The site plan as proposed meets all the setbacks of the general commercial and retail zoning district. It includes a signage plan for 2 signs, one that would be 5 feet by 3 feet, and the other that would be 3 feet by 6 feet for a total of 33 square feet. This is also consistent with the requirements of the zoning code. As mentioned, the Planning Commission has discretion to approve the use and the placement of storage containers. As the ordinance is written for the placement of storage containers currently, Planning Commission approval is required for the appropriate number of containers, the appropriate location relative to neighboring properties, the exterior treatment of the containers, any utility connections, and approval of signage placed on the cargo containers. As I said, the code prohibits that cargo containers may be stacked, though I think that my interpretation of that code is that it did not anticipate that people may use it for construction for occupancy and they would use it exclusively for storage. And so that is not a building and safety concern that they might be stacked. So that concludes my overview of the application this evening. I am happy to take any questions you have. I do want to make it clear to the Planning Commission that the decision this evening for the conditional use permit is for the reduction of the driveway width, for the use of the car rentals, but not the retail space or the showroom or the office. That is all allowable by right in the commercial district, and the placement of cargo containers for construction and occupancy. At this time, staff would request the Planning Commission hold a public hearing, and I'll leave it at that. I'm happy to take any questions you have this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elaine. And yeah, I'll second that. For the planning commissioners, if we have detailed questions for Elaine or other city staff, if we could hold those questions until after the public hearing. Otherwise, if there are any brief clarifications that we want on what was just said, I think that's appropriate before we start. Are there any comments from the Planning Commission before we start the public hearing? Okay, then I will open the public hearing. Again, just remind anyone attending the meeting that if you would like to make a statement, just use the raise hand feature in Zoom. And when we call on you, we'll ask that you limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Unless there's ongoing discussion that follows from those comments. Okay. Do we have any public comments? Looks like we have Robert Sharp raising his hand.
Yes. One moment.
All right, looks like I'm unmuted this time. Thank you, appreciate that. Well, thank you again. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, honorable chairperson, as well as commissioners. I just, oh, by the way, Robert Sharp, I'm on East Line Street here in Bishop, California. I just wanted to speak to the use of the cargo containers on this property. There had been previous proposals to build metal structures on this particular property, and although retail is not prohibited, the way the current ordinances are, like Elaine said, they may not have anticipated the use of cargo containers for building materials. But I think it would be worth consideration that, considering the proximity to Main Street, the current plans that the city council has been working with their consultant to kind of figure out what to do with Bishop and revitalize it and look at all the different issues here, considering that this is becoming a main corridor to Main Street, you know, with commercial airfare beginning this fall, winter. We really got to be very careful about the use of our vacant properties, as they are almost non-existent within city limits. There are plenty of other open commercial spaces that could be utilized for something like this. They're proposing using gravel for the parking lot as well as for the driveway, which would be inconsistent with all the paved parking lots and driveways surrounding that particular property. The other thing is, you know, it's an aesthetic thing. There's been a lot of discussion in town that we want to make sure that what we're doing with these exceptions is adding value to the community. And, you know, this becoming the main corridor, this might be, I think the code uses the word obnoxious, but you know, it might stand out a little bit, you know, when it's surrounded by mostly early 1900 style buildings, and now you've got very modern cargo container building buildings that will be put in. The other thing that I worry about is when it comes to a new business doing this construction, we're going to be stuck with this construction for the next 100 years. All these buildings on this most of the buildings on this street are about 100 years old. The ones right by it are right there. And so, you know, we got to consider the fact that most new businesses, well, over 50% of them fell. So if we're making these exceptions and we're doing this construction on very limited space, we got to be thinking about the plan B. Who's going to move in there? What is it going to become? Now you have these cargo container structures. Who's going to want to move in there? What are they going to do to property values? What are they going to do to the aesthetics? What are they going to do to help appeal to the people coming into the community? I think they have a great business plan or a great business idea. And I think there might be vacant places available for them to do that. But I'm not convinced that that's something that you would want to particularly put on this piece of property. For those of you who haven't quite visualized it, it's basically directly across the street from Eldridge Electric, right next to State Farm on East Line Street, and then you get into all the residential properties. You got the Masonic Lodge 2 buildings over, and some apartments or offices that the county is vacating currently. So that could even be used, as it actually has a big parking lot in the back that's already paved. I want to be respectful of the 3 minutes, so let me know if I'm getting close. You know, I think there's a lot of information there that should be heavily considered. I also think that it might be worth considering this is a undeveloped piece of property, which is extremely rare in city limits, that we kind of wait for the city to finalize everything with the consulting work they were doing last year with the Zoom meetings, and kind of trying to figure out where to take Bishop, because like I said, anything we do with a vacant piece of property or any kind of exceptions we make for it, we're basically committing ourselves to something being there for the next 50, 100 years. And we want to make sure that whatever that is going to be beneficial to the community as a whole, considering it's not easily changed. If a business were to fail, or if it were to move out, or if you know, something just changes, you know, in life, and we got to be very mindful about that. And that's kind of my 2 cents. And I'm willing to take any kind of questions that the commissioners may have, if you want additional insight or opinion or anything like that.
Okay, thank you very much, Robert. All well taken comments. And thank you for taking the time to express those. Is there anyone else who would like to make a statement at this time? Okay, I see Lorenzo Tavar has his hand up.
Hi. I'm not sure if this is this the point where we would kind of make a quick presentation? Okay. So we are the, I'm Lorenzo, my partner Amy is here, and we are the people that have an offer on the lot. And so we had a couple things that we wanted to discuss quickly. Initially, I think we spent a lot of time and effort over the last week or two to kind of go around and meet almost all of the neighbors. I think we missed Robert. I'm sorry, we tried a couple times and couldn't meet up, but we are trying to match the neighborhood as best we can, and we actually did. I'm glad he brought up the Bishop use plan. We went over that entire 130-page document, and in our packet, if anyone has looked through that 50-page packet, there are a few pages on there that specifically compare side by side everything we did to match the Bishop plan. Secondly, I think just as far as this lot is a commercial lot, and I think the goals of it, as far as I've understood it, is to stimulate new and existing businesses and be an attractive place for visitors and for the people of Bishop. And the shipping containers, firstly, we went through a lot of effort to design them so that they're covered in siding. They wouldn't actually look at all like shipping containers. And if you flip through that packet and you look at the plans, you can see what the designs of them are. In that packet, we also included that we potentially are thinking about using SIPs. So this all came about because we consulted with the chairman of construction department at University of New Mexico, who kind of specializes in eco building. And so he recommended containers, and as a backup, SIPs, which are just structural insulated panels that use much less building materials and are just much more eco-friendly and easier to build with. So that is also always a backup. We are very open. If the container idea is not something people are comfortable with, we are happy to use SIPs, which looks like a more traditional build. But like I said before, and as you can see in our packet and in the design, it would actually look nothing like a shipping container with what we've done to the design. I also just wanted to quickly just mention that I think, so the big concerns were, one is that this was going to be some sort of transportation hub, I think what came up, and that's to, housing multiple shuttles and a big fleet of cars. We currently have 3 vehicles that we're going to be renting, and the plan for the shuttles currently is to not have any of them located on the property. So this really, the focus of this lot is to be a commercial shop near Main Street where we can sell and rent camping gear. And we think that that's kind of the perfect place for us to be. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. That's that is the design that we were talking about. And as far as the driveway goes, the reason why we requested a slightly smaller driveway, again, is just because of the how narrow the lot is. And we did go through a lot of effort to make sure that the entire back of the lot is going to have plenty of space, because we know that it is narrow. So there's a lot of parking spaces, and it really is more of just a retail shop. Yes, the part of the reason we are requesting the conditional use permit is because of the rental vehicles, but I think there was some confusion that this was going to be some super industrialized looking, busy bus depot kind of situation, and that's not at all the case. It's a small retail shop. We want to have stuff from local artists in the shop. We want to have camping gear, and we will have, as I said, currently we have 3 vehicles that will be on the lot for rent. So we never have the intention of having a large fleet of vehicles. It's just kind of a small niche thing that we wanted to do, is also provide not only the camping gear, but a way for people to get out into the mountains. One last thing I'll bring up that was another concern was education. So bringing more, we know that the plan of Bishop does call for, a more inviting tourist destination, but with that comes making sure that the people who are coming here are being responsible in how they use the surrounding area. So we are planning on making some efforts to educate our customers to make sure that people aren't on trails where they're not supposed to be. These cars also, I should mention, these are going to be 2 to 3 day minimum rentals. These are not hourly rentals. These are not ATVs or side-by-sides. So it won't be a in and out constant of loud vehicles. It's going to be 3 vehicles that are going to be gone for 2 to 3 days at a time. And we don't anticipate people using them as a 1 day off-roading rental. Yeah, thank you, Elaine, for pulling that up. And thanks, Robert, for the comments. I hope that helps as far as the cargo containers go. And if the cargo containers, even though they will be covered in siding, is not something that the city is interested in having, then again, we're more than happy to switch over to SIPs, which is just an insulated structural panel that we can use to build the office out of, which we have no problem doing. So thanks. And if there are any more questions, happy to answer them.
Okay, quick procedural question, Keith. I certainly have other questions for that Lorenzo will have to answer. Do we need to do that during the public hearing, or can we close the public hearing and call him back for responses?
You can ask, you have some flexibility on how you want to handle that. If you'd like to listen to the rest of the public comments and then bring in the applicant to discuss the specifics later, that's fine too.
Okay. Yeah, then I think right now I'd like to hear any other comments from the public. Okay, it looks like Matt Schober has his hand up.
Elaine, you'll need to allow Matt to talk because I now don't have the permission. There, thank you.
Matt, you should be able to talk.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Matt Schober. I'm getting some feedback here in the room, so just bear with me for a second. So I'm the owner of the property adjacent to this project. And I'd like to express my support for it. I think that the project developers have done a great job of doing their homework and providing a detailed application. Oh boy.
You still there, Matt?
Yeah, I'm just hearing myself in about a minute.
Okay, for us, it's kind of a faint background noise, so you're still coming through fairly clearly.
Okay, for some reason, I'm hearing myself about 30 seconds ago. Sorry for the technical difficulties here. Anyways, I'll keep it brief. I think these guys did a good job, and I'm in support of the project. I don't really have any objections, and I think they did a good job of outreach to us personally and to the community, and I hope they succeed.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your comments. Do we have any other comments from the public before we close the public hearing?
At this moment, I don't see anyone else, Eric.
Okay, can we have a motion to close the public hearing then at this point? From any of the commissioners?
I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Okay, do we have a second?
I will second that.
Michelle, can we have a vote?
Commissioner Lothrop,
Yes.
Commissioner Gaitis,
Yes.
Commissioner Truxillo,
Yes.
Chairman Leach,
Yes.
motion approved to close the public hearing.
Okay, we will now move on to discussion by the commissioners. So at this time, if you have any more detailed questions for Elaine, this would be a great time to ask. And if we have questions for Lorenzo, which I certainly do, it sounds like we have leeway to call him back and have that discussion. So who would like to start? Okay, anyone? Then I had a couple questions, which, let's see, were mainly, I guess, clarifications from the applicants. And so does Lorenzo have the ability to speak right now, or can we grant him that ability?
I will grant him that ability.
Okay.
Lorenzo, you should have the ability to speak.
Yes, hi.
Hi, Lorenzo. I also wanted to say I certainly appreciate the care that you all have taken in the preparation of this application and the sensitivity to ongoing efforts for the downtown overlay and redevelopment. But there were a few things that I was curious about. So you said that you're only going to have 5 to 6 vehicles in your fleet at any given time, right?
Yes.
Okay, and but then later there was discussion in your proposal about expansion, and in particular, there were some growth goals that I saw where you said, after 5 years, you hope to expand your operation to cover most of California, and I don't see how those two things are consistent. So I was curious if you could clarify that just a little bit.
Sure. So we currently already have 2 of the 3, or we have 3 of the vehicles that we're going to be renting. We're hoping that on this lot, we would eventually expand to no more than 5 vehicles. I'm sure it's in there somewhere in the packet. I'm honestly not sure where to refer you to, but I think we do mention the possibility of, in 5 years, if things are going well, opening different locations in different cities. So that wouldn't be Bishop. That would be potentially moving further up north in the Sierras, or Yosemite area, or going towards Tahoe. We have a lot of friends and family, and I was raised in Los Angeles, so that is also another potential. But this lot itself would never house more than 5 of those vehicles. And to be also I just want to say, just to clear that up, I am also going to be here running this lot. I have moved to Bishop, and I'll be here full time and be the one that's going to be running the office. So I am not going to be leaving Bishop, but just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thanks. So your vision for the expansion would be to open satellite offices elsewhere, not to expand your operations on this lot.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and also honestly, that was kind of a general 5-year plan. I think right now we're pretty focused on getting these 2 businesses off the ground. We just wanted to have goals. We potentially would like to be able to expand our businesses, but not on this lot.
Okay. There was also a statement, several statements in your application that for the mountain bound shuttles part of the business, the mountain bound shuttles this is the airport service, right?
Yes, it will be. Yeah.
Okay. But you said in no uncertain terms that there would be no shuttles coming to and from this property. Is that right?
Yeah, this property is not a stop for the shuttles. There should be no reason why these would be parked there or stopped there at any day. There's no reason why someone would leave the airport and fly to our retail business, so or to be driven there. So it would be going just into town and around to the hotels.
Okay. So the model then for your day-to-day operations, you envision that it would mainly be foot traffic coming, or people driving to your office to make arrangements to be picked up, or to get a shuttle to or from somewhere, or possibly to rent one of your 5 to 6 vehicles.
We don't expect many people to walk to the retail store for the shuttles. The retail store is for our retail business. I will be using the office to do work on the shuttle end from that office, and we will have the ability for a point of sale if someone did want to come in and do that. But our sales for the shuttles will be online and at the airport. We're going to have point of sale there. So while we're saying we are going to work out of this office, it's just because I will be kind of running both businesses most of the time. So I'll be in the same office, but no, I don't really anticipate people walking into the office to book shuttles.
And the point of sale for your rental business would presumably be at this office, right?
And also online, but yes. Yeah.
Okay. Then I guess I had one last question, which was, as far as the shuttle vehicles, you say they'll be stored off-site at the airport or another location. I was curious, do you already have an agreement about where those would be located, or is that TBD?
So we have had 2 meetings with, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting her title, but Ashley at the airport, who we've been talking to, who has been super helpful in giving us a lot of feedback in kind of what the need is of Bishop relating to the airport development. So there are no promises, no contracts have been signed, but they are planning on having pickup spots for shuttle companies, which is where we would probably leave our biggest shuttle. And we did discuss with her that the parking lot was going to be redone, and that there is the potential that we can rent those spaces at the parking lot because she's not anticipating huge numbers of cars being parked at the Bishop Airport. So we should be able to leave our additional 3 vans, which are just forward passenger vans, would be parked there. But it is not certain, but we also do have a large lot at one of our partners' homes that we can store them in the meantime until we come up with another solution. But again, there is no intent to keep those shuttles stored on this lot.
Okay. I think that's it for my questions for Lorenzo. I don't want to dominate the conversation, so please, other commissioners, jump in.
I do have a question. With regard to the storage containers, and I've seen such storage containers used and look really, frankly, very cool and awesome. I want to know if someone knows the ease in which you can install them and take them out.
I will go ahead and say that I am not 100% positive as far as how easy it is to remove them. We have talked to people, and that was kind of one of the benefits for the neighbors that we potentially discussed, is that the time that it would take to build this, because they are prefabricated and we can just bring them in and connect them and then work on the siding and the other stuff, it really does cut down the construction time considerably. So as far as the neighborhood and the neighbors are concerned, that would be, I'm sure, helpful for them. And I would assume they can be removed like a mobile home, where they can be, they're going to be welded together, I assume. So I'm sure they can be disconnected. But if I'm being totally honest, I'm not 100% positive of the process.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question on the storage of the rental fleet. So am I correct that would be on the south end of the property, in the same, behind the buildings, same area where the customer parking lot is? Is that where the rental fleet would be stored as well?
Yes. Yes, we have 10 spots up against the wall. So that's where we'll line those up, probably furthest from the shop, our ADA parking space first, and then customer parking in between the 2.
Thank you.
Yes.
Commissioner Lothorpe, anything you'd like to ask?
No, I'm just digesting everything. It appears that the containers are being used to kind of supplement the structural ability of these buildings to be able to be self-supportive, so that you don't have to pour foundations or anything. So I assume you're going to come in with concrete block or something and just make footings for the containers to be stacked on.
Yes, that's
and
correct.
Just thinking about these, if in fact they're going to be clad with wood and or brick, as indicated in the packet, I would imagine that taking them out would be kind of a messy job, because I assume that siding would not stick too well to a container that's being lifted up and dragged out back onto a trailer. I might just throw that out for food for thought.
Okay. I had a couple questions, I think, for Elaine, unless anybody else would like to speak right now. Okay. Elaine, you mentioned the setbacks, and that the setbacks are consistent with the current zoning. Can you just recap what the proposed setbacks are and how they would look with respect to the residential setbacks that are immediately adjacent?
Yes, good evening again. It's an excellent question. So I'll go ahead and put up that site plan again, which shows the setbacks. Just for illustration purposes. So I believe that I might have made an error in my staff report. There was some back and forth as it was being prepared with the applicants. And so in the staff report, it might have stated that there would be a 10-foot setback from the neighboring property to the west. That will actually be a 5-foot setback. There would be a 20-foot setback along East Line Street, and then fairly significant setbacks to the east and to the south. To the east, it would be, I forget the dimensions off the top of my head, but I think approximately 30 feet. The development standards for the zoning district have 0 lot line setbacks. So there are no setbacks required for commercial zoning. I did not take the measurements of the setbacks of the neighboring properties.
What's the general requirement for residential setbacks?
It's 20 feet in the front, 15 feet in the rear, and 5 feet on both sides.
Okay, so the 20-foot setback would be consistent with other houses in the area. It wouldn't stand out.
If I can, yes, I'm sorry. If I can just say really quick that we did measure our setback compared to the State Farm building next door. So they are identical to the building next to us.
Okay, thanks. That's good to know. My other question, Elaine, is, and this always comes up with these weird sort of mixed use zones. What noise ordinance would apply if there were construction and business related noise on this property? Are they exempt from the residential noise ordinance, and would that have to be added if we wanted to enforce that?
I don't ever remember the particulars of the noise ordinance off the top of my head, but it doesn't apply by zoning district. It's the same for commercial as it is for residential. There are special hours placed on construction, though they tend to be in favor of construction hours to some degree. I believe they start at 7 a.m. and go as late as 10 p.m. And I don't recall what the other balance of the noise ordinance says. I think it tends to be pretty open though.
Okay.
So generally, in summary, there wouldn't be a lot of noise restrictions in place for this property, is my understanding.
Okay, but the Planning Commission, if we were to approve this request, could request that the whatever noise ordinance is applied to a residential zone neighborhood apply to this property as well. Is that true?
There is not any noise ordinance that applies to residential zones. The Planning Commission can place additional conditions of approval on this use.
Okay. Okay. I had a memory. Well, there's a city noise ordinance, right, which you say is not by zone, and that I think that's 7 to 10, right? I had a vague memory that in commercial, or maybe it was industrial zones, that the hours were relaxed from that ordinance. Michelle's shaking her head. Is that true?
From what I believe, as you said, the residential is between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. and commercial, I believe there is no noise hours, because I remember we had an issue with Smart and Final when they were doing their remodel.
Okay. Okay. So I guess what I'm getting at is that if the Planning Commission were to approve this, I would like to attach a condition that the 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. noise ordinance apply to this property as well, assuming that's consistent with legal standards. And Keith, please comment if you have any objections to that. Okay. Is there any other discussion from commissioners?
I do want to mention So I was recently in Flagstaff, which is a very quaint mountain town, very tourist friendly. And I was walking down a street and I saw a 3 container unit building, and it was the most striking building in the area. So much so that I took a picture of it. And I do not believe that that area that we're talking about is all that unified in terms of buildings. You know, you've got Victorian, you've got Mediterranean, you've got ranch style, you've got whatever the Masonic Lodge looks like, which is, I don't know, Chicago Gothic from the 20s. I don't really think it's going to be that much for it to, I think this might add to an eclectic vision that may once become Bishop down the road. And if we don't like it, I don't think it's something that will be around 100 years. So I just wanted to mention those things. I also like the business model and the plan, and I think it's nice that someone's thinking forward for the airport. Those are my thoughts. I just want everybody to hear that.
Thanks, Hank.
Chairman Leach,
Yes.
I happen to notice there is a public question. I know that public comment is closed.
Yeah, Keith, can you comment on whether we can entertain public statements at this time? Public hearing has been closed.
So the commission always has discretion to reopen the public hearing and accept more public comments, or given that the commission is deep into its deliberations, it can decline to reopen it.
Okay, I would be inclined to allow it if commissioners are okay with that. Okay, then I see Robin Stater has her hand up.
Robin, you should be able to talk.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I couldn't get logged on earlier.
And sorry, just a reminder, Robin, that we're trying to keep public comments to 3 minutes.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
So I have 2 properties on East Line Street, one 2 doors down and one across the street and 1 door down. I'm of the same mindset basically as Robert as far as keeping it more consistent in the neighborhood and using the lot to the highest level for the community. I did meet with Lorenzo. I like them. I think they're nice people. They're trying to do something interesting, but also being a business owner for over 50 years in the Eastern Sierra, and knowing a lot about retail, I have my questions and my doubts about whether what they're proposing will work. I'm not a naysayer. I'm just a realistic person who has run retail businesses for a very long time. I think, possibly it might work in another area a little bit better, but I really believe that even though they made a nice package, I talked to them a little bit about the numbers. A package is one thing, and then there's real numbers. So you've got a lot of numbers to consider about, the airport, how many planes are coming in, how many people are coming in. There are other shuttle businesses. And as Lorenzo just said, he doesn't actually have a place for his shuttle buses now. And he's making a plan based on not having a place for his shuttle buses. So I didn't know that. Then he said he might put it on a friend's lot. So I don't know what the zoning is there. Just a lot of unknown things. And I don't think that container buildings are really a classic kind of building. It's sort of a trend, very trendy. You can say there's a lot of mixed looks here in the neighborhood. There are, but I just find that to be very trendy looking. And I find the whole, camping idea, it's a cultural thing right now. And yes, we will always have camping and we'll have hiking here, but I just don't think that it's the best use for that particular lot. And I do wish them all the best of luck. So, but I don't support that being allowed on that lot. That's all.
Okay, thank you for your comment, Robin.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm going to move that we reclose the public hearing. And can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Michelle, can we take a vote?
Chairman Leach,
Yes.
Commissioner Truxillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Lothar,
Yes.
Commissioner Gaitis,
Yes.
motion approved to reclose the public hearing.
Okay, so I'm going to call for a motion in just a second, but I just wanted to ask Keith if, for example, we want to attach conditions to the permit, should we approve it? Do we do that before the motion, or do we do that after as we're discussing the motion?
I think we have to go in the motion.
Yeah, it would be before.
Okay, so it's before we propose a motion.
Right.
Now, is there a possibility that we could have them post a bond to deconstruct the business if it fails?
I don't see any legal prohibition on the city imposing that condition, no.
Would we have to, I'm sorry, will we have to come up with a very specific amount for the bond?
Yeah, given that the applicant is unsure of the exact process on how they're going to be installed, it's likely he doesn't know how they're going to be disassembled if need be, and it would be difficult to, we could probably just put language that says the applicant shall post a bond in the amount to be approved by the city prior to building permit, something vague, something like that.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm with Bob on that. I was thinking the bond might be a good idea.
Well, it seems like a bond would address several of the public comments that we've had. I'll just make the comment from my perspective. I think that it's in the Planning Commission's purview to make decisions about, is it a reasonable use of the lot given the zoning? Is it an equally or less obnoxious use than the uses that are currently allowed? Things like that. I don't really feel like it's my business to make predictions about whether or not they're going to succeed or fail, and make decisions about whether or not to allow them to try based on that. But that's just my personal perspective. It does seem like they're making a reasonable attempt to do a very nice job to integrate with the neighborhood and with Bishop's plans. It seems like, I'm entirely sympathetic to the perspectives of people who own homes in the neighborhood, particularly in the sense that I think we would all prefer to see, more housing built in the city of Bishop. But it's also not for us to decide who what lots are available when, and what landlords are, willing to sell them for, and who's able to buy them. And this seems an entirely reasonable use, and certainly not more obnoxious than, I don't know, a public garage or an auto sales and service or a repair garage or a lumber yard or a super service station, all of which are allowed in C1 zoning by the Bishop Municipal Code. So that's my perspective. I also support, Bob, your motion to add a bond should we approve it. I would also like to assert that the residential noise ordinance would have to apply to this property. So if we can insert language to that effect, are there any objections to that?
No objections.
Okay.
And I also think that perhaps something we can visit later is that if you're in a mixed use area, the most we're going to have to come up with rules that how we apply such situations. So it must always the most restrictive ordinance must apply in a mixed, between all the various ordinances that you could look at. But that's a topic for later discussion.
Yeah. I also, there's one other condition that I could see wanting to impose, and that's, Lorenzo has made the statement that, there are no plans for shuttles to stop here. And the other concern that I've heard from multiple residents is the impact on traffic on that street. And so, is it possible to say that, no shuttles will ever stop there? Is that something that we can impose, or is that beyond the purview of the Planning Commission? I guess that's a question for Keith.
No, go ahead, Mr. Lothar.
Well, I kind of foresee that if their business takes off, being able to pick up somebody at the airport in a shuttle or one of their smaller vehicles to bring that person to the property to rent one of their camping vehicles. So.
Yeah, I guess, sorry, I should amend that statement. Not that they can't stop there, but that, we don't want shuttles stationed there and coming and going out of that driveway with any regularity.
So it's certainly within the purview of the Planning Commission to set conditions on how the property will be used. But when you set conditions, you have to be cognizant of how it would be enforced and any potential problems with enforcement. If you say that there's no circumstances where a shuttle would ever be allowed to pick somebody up at the property.
Yeah, that seems needlessly restrictive and impossible to enforce.
Well, you can enforce it. It would just be pretty onerous.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Chairman Leach, I would also mention, I think it's going to be a drop in the bucket compared to the probable increase in traffic we're going to see from the airport for any number of reasons, not just this one business.
Okay. I think that seems entirely reasonable.
And I know that we've used the word shuttle, and I think most of us think about the shuttles being the ones like the Eastern Sierra uses running around town. My guess is most of their shuttle activities probably going to be like he mentioned earlier, that they would probably be Ford vans. Not unless his business takes off so rapidly that he's going to be shuttling around 20 or 30 people at a time. Most likely it's going to be a half a dozen or 3 or 4 people wanting to either be picked up at the trailhead, brought down to town to spend a night in the motel and gather provisions, and then shuttle back up to the trails again. So I don't see them having to invest in a quote unquote real shuttle like they use at the airport now. Just the cost and the size of having to maintain them would be probably prohibitive initially.
Okay. So I hear that there's support for introducing language about having a bond to remove the structure should the business fold. And I hear that there's support for enforcing the most restrictive noise ordinances, which would be the residential noise ordinance. Are there any objections from planning commissioners to adding that language?
No, I just have one question though. The applicant also mentioned as an alternative to the storage containers, another type of, I can't remember what it was called, but an alternative building approach outside the storage containers. I assume we don't want this bond to apply to that, or would it be specific to the storage container approach?
I'm going to assume that these people are one of several offers that are being made on the piece of property. And that if I assume that they're going to purchase this property, so they're going to invest X amount of dollars in the dirt itself, I would assume that if the camping vehicle and camping equipment business fails, they will probably want to use those same structures in some other kind of a business, at least try to sell some of it.
Okay, but I think Andrew, I think your question is whether or not the bond measure would apply to a conventional structure on the property.
Correct.
If they were to do that.
Correct.
It seems that, we don't require that of other businesses. and this conversation seems like it's been fairly specific to cargo containers. I don't know how other commissioners feel about that.
I agree with that, specifically to cargo containers, partly because we're not experienced with that situation.
I agree with that as well.
Okay. So then we would be adding language, should we approve this permit, that the owners would put up a bond sufficient to remove cargo containers, should they choose that as their architectural element, and language to enforce that the most restrictive noise ordinances would apply to this property during construction and operation of the business. Okay. Then I'm going to call for a motion.
Well, I'll make a motion. I'm not sure the best way to say it, but to approve, how do I put it? Because we want to include those two items.
I think we can say to approve the conditional use permit,
yeah.
Subject to the addition of language.
So do I have to talk the language specifically? Yeah, I guess that's a question for Keith.
As clearly as you can state it would help staff put it and amend the resolution.
So so then I'm going to make a motion to approve the conditional use permit, subject to the property owner making a bond, and I'm not good at this, so I'm working on it, making a bond sufficient to remove the containers should that be necessary good enough for that, as well as conditional upon the use of the most restrictive noise permitted, which would be residential.
Okay.
Does that work?
Elaine, do you have what you need?
I believe that I have language to amend the resolution. Thank you.
Okay, I'll second that motion. Do we have any further discussion on the motion before we call for a vote? Okay, Michelle, can we have a vote?
Commissioner Truxillo,
Yes.
Chairman Lothar,
Yes.
Chairman Gaitis,
Yes.
sorry, Commissioner Gaitis, Chairman Leach.
Yes.
Okay, motion approved for the request for a conditional use permit to allow for use of the property for vehicle rentals and vehicle rental storage, waiving the driveway width of 20 feet to 20 feet from 24 feet for two-way traffic, and allowing for the placement and use of cargo containers for the retail construction in compliance with the California Building Code as described in the application, with the conditions that the applicant is to post a bond sufficient to remove the cargo containers if necessary, and to add the residential noise ordinance hours of 10 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle. With that, I think we can move to the next item on the agenda.
Sorry,
yes.
the last thing, I just wanted to say thank you to all the commissioners for hearing us, and also Elaine and Michelle, thank you so much for help with the application. Thank you, guys.
Okay, and once again, I appreciate everybody who has attended the meeting in person and made public comments and offered their perspectives. So with that, let's move to the second item. Elaine, would you like to introduce this before we open a public hearing?
Chairman Leach, give me just one moment. I just text Tricia.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I forgot. We have to wait for Tricia to come back. Why don't we have a 5-minute break if people need to go get water or anything?
Thank you.
Trisha, are you back with us?
I am. I actually had I didn't know that my spouse was going to be making a public comment, and I just wanted to know how and where I would, if, how that gets disclosed, just.
I think that's a question for Keith.
Okay, yeah, so I will wait, and you know, he's his own person, so if I'm off eating, so Keith, I wanted to make comment that my husband was one of the public commenters, and since I recused myself, I just wanted to not have there be any conflict of interest. I consider him his own individual with his own thoughts, and I didn't know he was going to speak. He was moved to do so. So is that put in the public record?
Yeah, you just put it in the public record by saying that. There's no conflict of interest. You didn't participate in the decision, and he as a citizen has the right to participate just the way he did.
Okay, thanks
Sure.
for that.
Okay, well, I think we can proceed if everybody, Elaine, are you with us? Okay, we'll wait for Elaine to come back. Okay, we have Elaine. Keith, are you with us? Yep, okay, great. Then let's move on. So we're now going to move on to what was the agenda item? It was 6B, or I keep track. We are going to move on to 6B, public hearing on the conditional use permit for 162 Grove Street. So Elaine, would you like to introduce us?
Yes, thank you again, Chairman Leach. Good evening again, commissioners. As introduced, this application is a conditional use permit for the property located at 162 Grove Street. That property was the former location of the County Health and Human Services offices, which have now relocated to the new Inyo County Consolidated Office Building. The application has been received from Bishop 26 LLC on behalf of the property owners Connie and Mike Lane Trust. The request is to waive the parking requirement to accommodate the new retail use at the property. The property and the building are pre-existing non-conforming use developed likely in the 70s prior to the establishment of the current zoning codes. There are 17 parking spaces on site for a building that is approximately 10,000 square feet on an approximately 14,800 square foot lot. There is not room on site to accommodate additional parking, and the building needs to be fairly significantly altered to convert it from office spaces into a retail space. It is that alteration that triggers the requirements to come into conformance with the current development code, which requires one parking space for every 300 square feet of retail space. That application would require approximately 34 parking spaces, where, as I described, only 17 are currently provided. I should say that in conversations with Inyo County after the publication of the agenda, unfortunately, there were 50 county employees who worked at that facility prior to moving. The applicant did reach out to the neighboring property to enter into a parking agreement, but the owner or the leasee of that parking lot declined to share the parking under a parking agreement. This application has been reviewed by the Bishop City Administrator, Public Works Department, the Fire Department, and the Bishop Police Department, and no concerns have been received at this time. We did receive one public comment letter, which I believe has been shared with you, from the owner of Jack's Restaurant, indicating concerns about the number of parking spaces and constraints that there might be with customers potentially using the parking lot of his interest. However, as I said, the previous tenant had 50 employees who were working a full day shift at that location. And so it is entirely possible that the new use will reduce the demand on the parking for that property. The applicant is proposing to use one of those parking spaces to build a trash enclosure, and renderings of the proposed modifications to accommodate a retail use are included in your agenda packet. Staff is proposing that a categorical exemption be applied to this project because it can be seen there will be no impact on the environment since there will be no physical modifications that are made to the site. With that, that concludes my overview of the project application. Staff would request that the Planning Commission would hold a public hearing, and I'm happy to take any questions you have at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. Okay, so once again, if we have any quick clarifications, that's fine, but let's hold our detailed comments until after the public hearing. Are there any quick comments right now from the commissioners? Okay, then with that, I'm going to open the public hearing. And just remind people who are attending, if you would like to speak, just use the raise hand feature of Zoom and we'll call on you, and please keep your remarks to just 3 minutes. Would anyone like to make a public comment? Okay, I don't see anyone. Michelle? Did I miss anyone, or?
No one's raising their hand. I believe the applicant is on. I'm not sure if he's interested in speaking.
Okay, well, if not, then if the applicant is on and we have questions, we can call the applicant in at that time.
Okay.
The applicant is on.
Okay. Great. Then I'm going to move that we close the public hearing. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Michelle, can you take a vote?
Chairman Leach,
Yes.
Commissioner Truxillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Lothar,
Yes.
Commissioner Gaitis,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu.
Yes.
Motion approved to close the public hearing.
Okay, then I would call for commissioner discussion at this point. If we have any detailed questions, it sounds like the applicant is available, and otherwise, any questions for Elaine, now would be an appropriate time to ask.
Elaine, I have a question. You said that the county has indicated there were 50 people working in the building.
That is correct.
And then I assume that was mentioned so that we would have maybe the inclination that 50 cars had to be parked somewhere in the general neighborhood?
I requested that information to try and understand what that parking situation had been with the previous tenant, correct?
And I assume then, since we got the letter from Jack's, that they were probably being burdened by people using their lot?
It is entirely possible, correct?
There are no city lots in a reasonable walking distance from that building, are there?
The nearest parking lots would be on Academy or on Church Street, which would be a couple of blocks, perhaps.
Yeah. So something that probably wouldn't be used, not unless you were like an employee of the county that knew where to park and was going to be not using their car for the bulk of the day.
Well, I would add, Bob, that I walked over there kind of mid-afternoon today just to sort of, suss out what the, street parking looked like in nearby municipal lots. And the nearest, I guess the nearest lot would be right behind, what is it? It's by the it's the corner where the Broncos Deli used to be. It's not the Broncos Deli anymore, right? And then the lot right across the street there. There were, between those two lots and street parking, not including the street parking by the county building, there were 35 free spots within a 1-minute walk of that location. I'll still grant you that a lot of people may not do that walk, but it took me 1 minute, and it took me 2 minutes to get to the bigger lots where there were 70 available parking spots. So I'll just share that perspective.
And I'll jump in that Grove Street seems to have a 3-hour limit for the street parking, that it's adjacent to the building in question. So if you're working an 8-hour day, you're not parking on Grove unless you're moving your car around for just a handful of slots.
Right.
Could I ask, oh, so go ahead.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I think this is for Elaine. I just want to check on Jack's Restaurant. What is his remedy for people who are not allowed to park in his parking lot?
There was not a remedy that was suggested.
I mean, can he tow cars?
I suppose it, currently the parking lot that's in question is, he's leasing it from LADWP. So I'm not entirely sure what remedies he has in that. But it's my understanding that he will be purchasing it and owning it and would be able to exercise all private property rights in that regard.
So at this current time, though, if somebody parks in his lot, he may not have an ability to fix the situation.
I don't know. I certainly not my area of expertise. Certainly as a leasing, he may still be able to exercise the private property rights. But as I said, it's my understanding that in the near future, it will be his property.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
And piggyback, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, no, go ahead, Tricia.
Well, piggybacking off that, is it ever permissible to require that an applicant mitigate the concern with, say, a physical barrier and or signs? Like, for instance, notice at Max Sporting Goods parking lot, there is a chain going around the lot with signs. So there's a physical barrier. So if you're just looking for public parking, there would be some indication you couldn't just pull in. And the signs would indicate what businesses you could use parking in that lot. Would it be possible to have the applicant pay for a similar barrier with similar signage, educating their would-be customers that this lot is not, you can't use this lot?
I would defer to Keith. I think that could be a appropriate condition of approval. Obviously, it would be subject to an agreement of the Jack's parking lot property owner.
Yeah, it sounds like the contemplated condition would require an unrelated property owner to install signage. Since they're not before the Planning Commission, I would advise not to go that route. They certainly can do that without any commission or city involvement if they would like to just designate their spaces as their own. That's something that they could do without any involvement from the city.
I would, sorry, Tricia.
It just seemed that the letter from the owner indicated there are all these problems, but there's no signage to indicate existing use or what his desired use of his leased lot is. So that's why I was asking if it was permissible that as a condition that the applicant would be involved in that way. But I totally understand with the other property owner in question not being at the meeting, that is something that couldn't be implemented.
Sorry, Tricia, I was just going to add before that I also walked through the Jack's parking lot today, and most of the curbstones are painted with Jack's Parking only on them. So where you pull your car in, he's already painted that on this.
But the common driveway, the common alleyway doesn't have it doesn't have any barrier. There are 2 triangles in that lot, which could lend themselves to be kind of physical spaces for signs or barriers, so that somebody coming off the alleyway looking for parking wouldn't assume that that was a public lot.
Yeah. But again, I think that would be placing a requirement on the owner of Jack's, which I don't think we have the right to do for somebody else's conditional use permit. I mean, for me, I go back to Elaine's statement that the county building when it was a county office, had 50 employees. And the proposed use is, the application is for a dollar store, right? And I did make some inquiries at the Family Dollar just to understand what their staffing looked like. And they said that they max out at 6 people at any given time. So I don't know exactly what the square footage of the Family Dollar is compared to this building. But it seems like there's going to be a dramatic reduction in the number of people who are parked there all day as employees versus what was there before. So then, to my mind, it comes to how much additional parking burden is there going to be from people shopping at the store, and even going through the math that the owner of Jack's provided. He says there's going to be 1,000 people a day at the store, and the store is going to be open for 14 hours. You can figure that's roughly 80 people per hour. How long do they spend in the store? If they spend 20 minutes in the store, you need 1 parking spot for every 3 people, so you can divide that by 3. You need 26 parking spots, and it's still significantly less than what would have been required by the county building before. So it seems to me like this use would be less obnoxious than the grandfathered use of the county building, with one exception that the owner of Jack's pointed out, which is that the county building was closed on the weekends. And so I think there'll be an additional overburden of parking on Saturdays and Sundays that wasn't there with the county building, but that overburden will be less than what it was with the county building during the week.
Agreed. I do have a question. So you mentioned a dollar store. Is that all of the square footage? I'm asking the owner or the plan, whoever is mindful of the plan. Is the dollar store plan to be the entire square footage of the building?
Do we have the applicant on, and can they respond to that question?
Yes.
It's just 1 minute. Let me give them permission.
This is Alan Hendry with Walbranchitos. We are the architects for the landlord. It's my understanding that the future tenant would be taking the entire building.
Thank you.
Alan, can I ask while you're on, I got some idea of what the staffing looks like at the existing dollar store in town. Do you have any idea what the staffing would look like at this business? I understand that you're the architect, but you might know.
At this point, for me, it would be a guess because we are not doing the interior for the tenant.
Mm-hmm.
We are strictly doing the modifications for demolishing the interior to prepare it for the tenant to come in to do their own work. My guess would be that it would be similar to Family Dollar,
okay,
but I couldn't say that for certain.
I had one other question I think that you could probably answer. That with the proposed modifications to the building, I know, Elaine, you said that we're asking for a categorical exemption because there's no modification to the physical site. Does that mean that the trees fronting on, what is it, Warren Street, I guess, will not be modified during the course of upgrading the building?
That's correct. The trees would remain. Everything would be just at the building face, and along Warren, it would be to take out the majority of the doors and replace them with a thin brick veneer to match more of what the front looks like on Grove Street.
Okay, thank you. Are there other comments or questions from commissioners?
It seems like with the square footage of this property, parking is always going to be an issue. So there's just something to bear in mind.
I'll second that thought. it's always going to be a problem unless you just turn the whole place into a parking lot.
I certainly agree. I still go back to, it seems to me it's going to be less of a problem than it has been historically. And it's, you know, we have a problem with vacant buildings, and we have a tenant who's proposing to bring this building up to code and put it to use. And we also have been discussing revitalization plans for downtown, a component of which is you know, not having parking lots everywhere and having more usage of existing municipal parking and reliance on distributed parking throughout the town. So all of this, you know, to me, all of this seems consistent with those goals.
Agreed.
Any other comments?
Chairman Leach, just to let you know, I have had a text from the future tenant. They say that there would be 6 maximum employees for the building.
Thank you, Alan. Okay, great. So my little back of the envelope calculation based on dollar store was sort of reasonable, sounds like. Okay. Andrew, anything from you?
No, I agree with all this. I mean, given that any building alterations are basically required for future retail use, and that requires, you know, a parking variance, and I think that failing to kind of approve this would prevent any retail use in that building in the future. So I support this and agree with everything that was said.
Well, I'll throw out some past history for that building. That building has been offices, but also on the alley side, many, many years ago, there was a office supply store in there. It was called Sierra Office Supply, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Bob, was that at the same time that Jack's existed?
Yes. Because I've been in town a little over 40 something years, and that used to be the store where I used to go buy my office supply stuff from.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from commissioners? All right. Do we have a motion then to approve the conditional use permit?
I make a motion to approve the conditional use permit.
Okay, I'll second that motion. Do we have any additional conditions that we feel are reasonable to place, or just approve it as is?
As is.
As is.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the conditional use permit for 162 Grove Street.
Commissioner Gaitis,
Yes.
Commissioner Truxillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Lothar,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Chairman Leach.
Yes.
Motion approved for the request for a conditional use permit to waive the parking requirements for a retail use at 162 Grove Street and permit the alterations of the building to accommodate a retail store with the existing 17 parking spaces.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you, Alan and commissioners. With that, let's move on to our final business item on the agenda, which is the housing element update. Elaine, I'm going to turn it over to you once again before we open the public hearing.
Thank you, commissioners. Michelle, could you please promote Sandra as well to be a panelist?
Yeah.
All right. Well, while we're waiting for Sandra to be promoted, I'll just provide a very quick background. You may remember that the Planning Commission held in May, I believe, Sandra was available to provide an overview of the draft housing element. and the data and the goals and policies within. At that time, it was under review by Housing and Community Development, which is required by California state law. We received comments back from Housing and Community Development, or HCD, on June 15th, and this final draft incorporates those comments into the draft housing element. The city is required by state law to periodically update the housing element, and the housing element is one of the elements of the general plan. This housing element is the 6th cycle of the update, and it covers the 6th cycle planning period, which is established by HCD from 2021 to 2029. If the Planning Commission recommends to the City Council to adopt this general plan amendment, it would replace the current housing element, or the 5th cycle housing element, and be in place through 2029. The housing element generally addresses the regional housing needs assessment or allocation, which is provided to each jurisdiction within California by Housing and Community Development, or HCD. And as what they anticipate we will need to develop in that planning period across different income levels. So it looks like Sandra will be joining us. Sandra Bauer is our consultant on this project. She has done an absolutely wonderful job shepherding this through the process in due order. It is, as you can see from looking through, it is quite an extensive document. There's a great deal of information and analysis in it. Sandra, are you available at this time? Or are we having a hard time getting you to promote?
Elaine, Sandra is able to talk, but it won't let me put her in as a panelist. I have now made you the host again, so that if you want to share the PowerPoint, you could try to promote her as a panelist also, but it's saying it went through, but it's not.
Yeah, I'm seeing that same thing. Okay, commissioners, please hold on a moment. Just gonna go see if there's something I can do. Please hold on one moment.
Elaine, I'm happy to just talk without being visible.
Just wanted to check. That's all we'll plan to do.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like the easiest solution here.
Okay, so unfortunately we have some technical difficulties, so we'll enjoy Sandra's presentation without unfortunately being able to see her. One moment while I get the PowerPoint loaded. Okay, Sandra, we are all prepared. Thank you.
Okay, Elaine, what's on my screen is some schematic renderings of the project on Grove Street.
Is that true for everyone? Can anyone see the presentation?
No, just the Grove
We're
Street.
still seeing the Grove Street project,
Okay,
but I can see your cursor moving, right?
okay, hold on. a minute, please. Thank you. I just not that one.
I do have a copy here. I could just start reading from it.
Is that better?
Yes.
There it goes.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, great. And Elaine, are you going to, or shall I just go ahead and do it from here? All right, I'll just go ahead and Okay, so my goals for the presentation tonight are to review key elements of the 2021 through 2029 housing element, including an overview, the process and schedule, CEQA compliance, Bishop's accomplishments in meeting goals from the prior housing element, which is just now coming to an end, and housing needs for the current housing element that extends through 2029, and the goals and actions that set forth the city's plan to meet these current housing needs. And then equally important is the goal to provide information and answer questions as the commission considers its recommendations to the city council. Okay, so the 2021 through 2029 housing, oh, let me go back. Yeah, okay. Is nearing completion now, and it's scheduled to go to the city council on the 9th of August for their consideration whether to adopt the negative declaration and approve the housing element update. If the council acts to approve, the housing element will go back to the state where HCD, that's Housing and Community Development Department, will make a final determination whether to certify it. The process has taken place in a very tight timeframe and requires city action no later than the 28th of August in order to avoid housing element updates every 4 years for 2 cycles. Bishop is currently on an 8-year update cycle. The housing element that's before you this evening reflects a great deal of input that's been received through public participation, HCD review comments, substantial data and review provided by AMACA, and consistent, strong direction set by city staff, city council, and by the Planning Commission. In terms of the process, the city began work on this update in March of this year. Again, the state legislation requires that it be completed at the city level no later than the 28th of August. With tonight's meeting, we are nearing the final phase of the update. Major milestones were that we had an online housing survey in March, as well as the first public meeting. The draft housing element was sent to HCD for a 60-day review and comment period in April. The draft negative declaration went out for a 30-day public review at the beginning of May. We held a second public meeting also in May. We received comments back from HCD in June. And tonight, of course, you're meeting to consider your recommendations to the council. And we are scheduled to go to the council on the 9th, but we also have a second date in the event the council wants to continue. CEQA compliance. The initial study is a broad assessment of environmental factors to determine whether the housing element update could have significant adverse effects on the environment. The criteria considered in the CEQA review include aesthetics, greenhouse gases, biological and cultural resources, wildlife risk, transportation, wildfire risk, noise, land use, and many, many other factors. The analyses indicate that adoption of the housing element would not adversely impact the environment. And that's because the housing element is a policy level document. Its adoption would not be sufficient to undertake any discretionary housing activities. Future projects resulting from the action program will be subject to CEQA requirements, and environmental effects would be analyzed when the projects are proposed and mitigations provided if and as needed. The draft negative declaration was distributed on the 3rd of May for a 30-day public review and comment period that closed on the 2nd of June. No comments were received, and the initial study is now complete. For the housing element cycle that is currently ending, the city was able to meet only 40% of its regional housing needs allocation, which is known as RHNA. And yet during that period, the city was laying groundwork for more robust RHNA compliance in the years ahead. And some of the important components of that were the Warren Street beautification project, the economic development element update, with AMACA, the acquisition of the Silver Peak site in the city of Los Angeles. The block grant funded EPA Next Steps Memorandum for Bishop recommended an update to the municipal code and a strategy to expand high density and mixed use development. And then the downtown specific plan. If you look at housing elements for the period from 2009 through 2014, as well as the last cycle, you can see that the city was able in that first period to meet 56% of the RHNA allocation. In this last cycle, the city met 40%. But when you look ahead to this next period, we are expecting that the city will actually exceed the RHNA allocation, which calls for 118 units. But we believe that there will be something on the order of 157 units provided. Known housing projects are expected to enable the city to meet and exceed its overall RHNA allocation. The new supply is expected to be concentrated toward the lower income brackets. Bishop expects to exceed the allocation for extremely low, very low, and low income units by fully 58 units, with a total of 102 units anticipated by the year 2029. The city does expect to fall somewhat short of the RHNA goal for moderate and above moderate units, providing 55 of the 74 RHNA allocation. Overall, the city expects to exceed the 118 unit allocation by fully 29 units, providing 157 units in comparison with the 118 unit goal. This will be the city's highest RHNA compliance to date, and it reflects the city's multi-year effort to improve housing opportunity. And the housing element also looks ahead to the next cycle that would be from 2029 through 2037. And current projections indicate that the city will be able to provide 220 units by 2035. And this includes 81 units for lower incomes and then 139 units for moderate and above moderate income residents. There is no RHNA for that cycle yet, but the inventory projections do indicate that full compliance is likely. The action plan is at the very heart of the housing element process in that it identifies the city's goals. It sets forth the steps that the city will take to achieve the goals, and it identifies responsibilities for following through. The housing element contains 5 goals, and the 5 goals are supported by 30 actions. The goals and actions do reflect input from decision makers and staff, from HCD, and from Bishop residents and stakeholders. In considering whether to certify the housing element, HCD will review the goals and actions closely to determine whether they will enable Bishop to meet its 2029 RHNA goal of 118 units. So my thought is, rather than reading through all of the actions, just profile the goals and some of the key actions. The first goal is to provide and maintain adequate sites to develop new housing. And this would include such things as working with the city of Los Angeles, showcasing mixed use potential, encouraging a variety of housing types, supporting the conversion of commercial land to residential, supporting the Veterans Housing Project, and also letting agencies other than Los Angeles know if they own land in this area that's considered surplus, that the city of Bishop would be interested in learning about them for an opportunity for lease or for purchase. The second goal is to promote infill, socioeconomic equity, and environmental protection. And this includes actions such as finalizing the downtown specific plan, amending the zoning code, supporting the mobile home park resident ownership program. And this is primarily by seeking grant funds, And then also considering whether to establish a tax increment reinvestment zone. The third goal is to foster housing equity and balance. And this includes pursuing grant funding and then maintaining, excuse me, an inventory of housing to ensure that it remains affordable. To clarify the process for obtaining rehabilitation credits and manage short-term rentals, and to seek opportunity zone investments, because the city is a certified opportunity zone, and that means that investors are eligible for tax incentives. The fourth goal has to do with removing constraints and creating incentives for the construction of housing. This would include incentivizing accessory dwelling units, providing priority processing for qualified projects, nurturing developer relationships, reconciling lease terms and loan terms when they make it difficult to arrange lease and sale of surplus lands, to discourage vacant parcels, and to expand the housing tools for low-income residents. And then the fifth goal, this is part of the legislation that's been passed since the last housing element, is to affirmatively further fair housing. And this has 4 actions in total. 3 of them are related to informing the public through a brochure and then through web links and through outreach so that residents understand fair housing policies, the assistance programs that are available, their rights and their remedies, and the range of incentives that are available to them in Bishop. And then the fourth action is to establish a streamlining process for eligible multifamily housing projects. Overall, the city of Bishop is in a very good position to meet its RHNA obligations for at least the next 2 housing element cycles. The current Housing Element Action Plan offers a genuinely exciting vision of the city's future opportunities, and it also represents a major commitment of the city's time and resources over the next 8 years. The contents of this 2021 through 2029 action plan have been strongly shaped by legislation that was passed since the last housing element in 2014. And the city can anticipate that significant new legislation will similarly impact the next housing element. In fact, a number of new housing bills were passed by the state legislature last year, and more are expected in the coming months. And I know that a summary has been included in the agenda packet that touches on some of the recently adopted legislation. That concludes my remarks, but I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Sandra. Quickly, before taking questions from the commission, there are a few points I want to add. I think that Sandra's overview and summary of the housing element was excellent. As you can see, some of those numbers about meeting the RHNA are very optimistic and rosy, given a real dearth of housing development we've had in the past 30 years in Bishop, and the significant land constraints that we have in the city of Bishop for new housing development. And so I just want to provide a little bit of additional context around those numbers. In your staff report, I did include some of the tables that were prepared by Center for the Housing Element, specifically Table 6, which is the available sites inventory. I'm sorry, I don't mean that. I mean Table 5, which is the available sites inventory for this RHNA compliance. And the 118 units that describe seems like a very large number of houses that we would be able to develop by 2029, given past trends. If you look at that table, you will see that 72 of those units would be associated with the successful completion of the Silver Peaks project. And many of those other units are identified in already either entitled projects or projects that we will be looking to support in the future. For instance, the Bishop Nursery project is included in that inventory as a project that's entitled, and we anticipate would be built by 2029. New ADUs, which count towards the RENA, are included in here, and that is something we've seen a large increase in applications for. And then commercial to residential conversion, which would be supported by the downtown specific plan and mixed use overlay. So although it sounds ambitious, I do think it is accomplishable. Though, as Sandra said in her presentation, and this really needs to be underscored, it will require commitment of the city's resources to get this done. And so it's easy to allow plans to sit on a shelf, but in order to see these things done, it will require a committed effort from the city and the planning staff to ensure that these projects make it over the finish line. As part of that, I've also included in your staff report and in the housing element, there is a map of the Bishop available sites inventory, which is a requirement of HCD as part of this document. They have very strict requirements about what is allowed to be included in that available sites inventory. You can't have anything under a certain size. You can't have anything over 10 acres. It has to be reasonably connected to infrastructure, which is a real constraint in the city of Bishop. Most of our privately held lots are under 1/4 of an acre and are not eligible to be included. Most of our other properties are owned by DWP and are over 10 acres and also are not allowed to be included. However, we did identify these sites as available sites that are the key opportunity sites to pursue for new housing development in that next 10 and possibly almost 20-year time frame. Many of these properties that are identified on Exhibit 1, the Bishop Available Sites Inventory Map, are DWP properties. And this property map was developed in collaboration with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power Real Estate Department. They were identified by their real estate department as properties that are not necessary for DWP operations, do not have significant environmental constraints, and would be suitable for future development. And I want to really highlight the significance of that map, particularly since, as you may be aware, Mayor Garcetti of Los Angeles came up and met with Mayor Mahove and City Administrator Ron Phillips a couple weeks ago. And the conversation focused very much about housing and how DWP could support us in our objectives to meet our housing needs. And at that meeting, I was asked directly by DWP management, what we would do if DWP made land available, how we would prioritize housing, which properties we'd be interested in. And so I would like to encourage the commission to consider that they might recommend to the city council that our housing element be shared with DWP after its adoption as the first step in taking initiative towards implementing the housing element, achieving these goals, and maintaining that really positive relationship and commitment that was made by the city of Los Angeles. With that, I do also want to reiterate what Sandra said. We shared a handout with you this morning regarding upcoming housing laws. That's also publicly available on the Planning Commission agenda on the City of Bishop website. So that would conclude staff's presentation this evening. I'm happy to take questions you have, but staff is recommending that the Planning Commission hold a public hearing and adopt a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Bishop recommending the City Council of the City of Bishop adopt a negative declaration for the 2021-2029 housing element update and amending the general plan to add the 2021-2029 housing element, superseding and replacing the existing housing element. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I have a question about the map and parcel number 6. It's showing, I guess it's identified as East Line Street. Is it actually on 3rd, South 3rd? Sorry, I
the-
know it just,
The address.
just to jump.
Main Street.
Because, so I'm just curious what parcel that is. Can't think of any parcel on. There is an empty parcel at Line and Third, one house in, or 1.5 houses in, but I am looking, I'm wondering if I'm at the wrong corner or.
So this is the undeveloped land that is east of Hanby and adjacent to the canal.
Okay, that's a different, okay. In the map on page 2, in the exhibit 1, the inventory map.
Yeah.
That the one that you just referenced is in green. The one I'm asking about is number 6, which is in yellow.
Number 6 corresponds to that parcel in green.
Yeah, it's a little confusing.
I see,
the
okay.
labels are those yellow boxes, but they correspond to the green parcels.
Okay, thanks. So, thank you. That kind of threw me for a curve. Thank you.
No worries. The numbers are intended to relate back to the inventory number in the corresponding table on the previous page.
I think there are going to be other questions, but we are meant to hold a public hearing, and we do have we have at least one attendee still. So can we maybe hold more detailed commissioner questions, and let's open the floor for the public to make comments if there's anybody who wishes to at this time. And if there's not, then I will move to close the public hearing. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay. Michelle, can we have a vote?
Chairman Leach,
Yes.
Commissioner Truxillo, Commissioner Lothar,
Sorry, you're muted, Bob.
Yes.
Commissioner Gaitis,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu.
Yes.
Motion approved to close the public hearing.
Okay. All right. Now we can ask any other detailed questions.
So I have a question. I'm not sure who I'm directing this to, but it's with regard to all of this, the city element. How are we communicating with the county? For example, should the county decide to build 100 units just outside of Bishop? I'm sure you are communicating. I just want to know, how are we receiving that information?
I may be reading into your question a little bit, so I'm going to answer it in a couple of different ways. If Inyo County did a housing development outside of city limits, it does not count towards our requirements to provide housing as placed upon us by the state of California that we need to address within this document. There is, and we've shared this, our housing element with Inyo County. They're in the process of updating theirs concurrent to ours. There is not generally a great deal of communication between the City of Bishop Planning Department and the Inyo County Planning Department for planning applications. There also haven't been significantly large planning applications such as you described that have been proposed. And I anticipate for that type of significant development, the Inyo County Planning Department would need to coordinate with the City of Bishop to ensure things like sewer capacity and water hookups and traffic. And those things for a development the size of, say, for instance, 100 homes would require environmental and review impacts, and there'd be, sizable public input opportunities. Now that is just at a staff level. There is also communication between the council and the Board of Supervisors on a regular basis, as well as the city administrator and the county administrator for those types of larger issues.
So for our purposes, the Planning Commission, it would be useful, for example, the map that you showed with opportunity parcels. I'd love to see that as well as the county opportunity parcel map, because, you know, I mean, half of Bishop really isn't in Bishop. And so whatever prospect, I love the housing element. I just want to see essentially the county housing element overlaid.
I don't know that we can do that within the confines of this document. However, I am very happy to get that information from the Inyo County Planning Department and share it with the commission at a future item. And in particular, in preparation for their housing element, I know that Inyo County underwent a planning project in which they identified as many opportunity parcels, including parcels that may potentially be rezoned for housing throughout Inyo County and in the Bishop area. And if the commission would like to request a presentation for a future agenda item, that would be appropriate. Thank you.
I just think it would be useful for the city council when it comes before them.
I like that suggestion, Elaine. If other commissioners agree, I would love to see such a presentation.
I would love it too, yeah.
Then maybe we can get that on the agenda for a future meeting.
I was simply addressing the short time span we have to figure things out, which we don't have any time, but I still love to see it.
Sandra, I had a couple questions about the RENA allocations, and just from my understanding of this process, you know, so in the last housing element cycle, you said we only met 40% of our target, something like that. And in the current one, we think we're slated to exceed our total target, but to fall short of it in certain income brackets. Is there any, does that activate any action on behalf of the state that we're not meeting these targets? Does it mean that, like, the 60% that we didn't meet in the last cycle, there's an expectation that we're going to achieve that in this cycle? Are there any consequences of that?
Well, okay, so in the housing elements that have been prepared to date, and the city has not yet met its RENA allocation in any of them, but HCD has not taken action. I think that HCD has focused on whether there is indeed a good faith effort being made by the city to achieve the allocations. And they have made comments from time to time throughout the process that they appreciate that Bishop has consistently made good faith efforts. And then in the same breath, I do want to say that the state legislature in these most recent years, really, I would say from 2017 to date, has become aggressive. And I think that it's probably fair to say that HCD will be more likely to apply penalties. And again, the primary penalty is to put the city on a 4-year housing element renewal cycle for 2 cycles, which is a great deal of added work for the city. It's a real penalty. But in terms of, and then another penalty is that you have less access to grant funding. And that's another big one because the city is heavily reliant on grant funds to achieve most of these housing element actions. So those, I think, would be the penalties, but I don't see that the city is in a position where that's likely.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, any questions? Any other questions? Elaine, I just had a quick question. If you could, since so much of this the RENA allocation in the upcoming housing element depends on the Silver Peaks project, if you could just recap where that stands.
Yeah, so that is, you may remember that the city helped facilitate the purchase of that property from DWP and transfer it to a limited liability partnership between MMACA and an affordable housing developer called Visionary Home Builders. That Visionary Home Builders really focuses in the niche of affordable housing and part of the reason for that specialty is because in order to build those homes, you have to secure grants and deed restrictions and tax credits to make the whole thing pencil. And so that's where they are at in the process. I have had some conversations with an architect developing preliminary plans. From the perspective of the city, based on those plans, which have not been submitted in any formal capacity, they are consistent with the zoning and the general plan, and for all intents and purposes are entitled for the need to go to HCD and start to pursue some of the grant funding that will be necessary to finance the project. And those notices for funding applications have been open in the month of July. There's another in September, and that partnership is working to secure some of those funds. The governor's office this past year had proposed, I believe, $12 billion for affordable housing projects to be spent in California in the next 3 years, plus $9 million for homelessness assistance. So a total of $21 billion coming from the state. I don't know what was improved in the final budget, but obviously that bodes well if MACA and its partner has site control of the project, has plans in place, and is well positioned to get some of that funding that we believe is forthcoming for affordable housing.
Okay, thanks for that perspective. Appreciate it. Okay, are there any other questions for Elaine or Sandra on this proposal? Okay, then do we have a motion to adopt resolution of the Planning Commission, City of Bishop, recommending the City Council adopt the negative declaration? Commissioners, unmute yourselves now if you'd like to make a motion. Can I make the motion? Okay, I'm going to make a motion that we adopt the resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Bishop recommending the City Council of the City of Bishop adopt a negative declaration for the 2021-29 housing element update and amending the general plan to add the 2021-2029 housing element, superseding and replacing the existing housing element. Do I have a second?
I second
it.
Okay, can we have a vote?
Chairman Leach,
Yes.
Commissioner Truxillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Lotharp,
Yes.
Commissioner Gaius,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu.
Yes.
Okay, motion approved to adopt a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Bishop recommending the City Council of the City of Bishop adopt a negative declaration for the 2021 to 2029 housing element update and amending the general plan to add the 2021-2029 housing element, superseding and replacing the existing housing element.
Okay. Furthermore, pursuant to Elaine's discussion about achieving the city's goals with respect to the goals that Sandra outlined and discussions that have been going on with the City of LA, is there a consensus among the planning commissioners that we recommend to the City Council that the housing element be shared with DWP as a first step to following up on verbal commitments that were initiated with Garcetti and as an ongoing means of meeting the goals with the City of Los Angeles?
I would agree with that.
Okay. Is this something that we need to formally vote on to recommend, or can we? Okay, so we can just agree that we want to make that recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Are there any objections? Okay. Great. Then let the record reflect that the Planning Commission has recommended that we make that suggestion to the City Council. Okay, and with that, we are on to the very last item on our agenda, which is staff reports, I believe.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for a very, very productive evening. I will keep my staff reports brief. The first item is with respect to the downtown specific plan and mixed use overlay. I anticipate that we will have an internal administrative draft of the final document at the end of August, available to share with the Planning Commission at late September or potentially the October meeting. Concurrent to that, we are working on the CEQA that is necessary for the City Council to adopt that document. And so that entire package will be considered by the City Council in spring of 2022. The only other item would be to provide you an update on meeting in person. And unfortunately, the update is that there is no update. At this time, we will be following the lead of the City Council. I believe that there's certain state regulations that require that we have a Zoom option available once the council returns to the chambers. So I know that the city staff is working to on all the technicalities of making that feasible, and hopefully I will have an update on when we can all meet in person again soon. Happy to take any questions this evening. Thank you.
No questions from me. Anyone else? All right, then I move we adjourn. I forget, do we need to vote on adjournment? Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone for your patience and all the time you've invested this evening. And we got lots of good stuff done, I think.
We did.
Yeah. And yeah, thanks to everyone. And thanks to city staff and Sandra for all of the excellent work on the housing element. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you to Sandra. She did a fabulous job for us.
Yeah.
My thanks to all of you.
Okay. Well, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.